It was an early December night, the first snowstorm of the year. Thick flakes fell, blanketing everything in white as I nestled in my bed, half watching a cheesy Christmas film while texting my friends George and Pat in our group chat. The glow of my phone lit the dark room, the perfect setup for a cozy night in. That piece shattered with a loud bang against my window. My heart dropped into my stomach. I whipped the curtain aside, expecting to see someone, but there was nothing but snow swirling in the night. Then another thud. This time, I saw it. A snowball had splattered against the glass dot. Someone was out there. Standing on my bed, I craned for a better look but saw no one. Determined to catch the prankster, I threw open the window and yelled into the freezing air. A deep laugh responded, chilling me more than the cold. It wasn't a child's laugh. It was an adult's, somewhere between 17 and 40. Slamming the window shut, I grabbed my phone and fired off messages to George and Pat, accusing them of messing with me. When neither replied, I felt certain it was them. Then, another snowball hit the window. This time, I was ready. I yanked the window open and locked eyes with a man in a black beanie, coat and gloves. He stood in the snow, waving up at me, his smile too wide, too unnatural. My breath caught. It wasn't George, it wasn't Pat, it wasn't anyone I knew. He started walking toward my window. Panic overtook me as I slammed the window shut, locked it, and yanked the curtain closed. My phone buzzed. Both George and Pat had finally replied with question marks, genuinely confused. Before I could respond, a single knock came at the window, followed by the sound of it rattling. He was trying to lift it. And then, just like that, it stopped. I waited several minutes, peeking through the curtain to find nothing but fresh snow and his fading footprints. Shaken, I told my parents, who came to investigate. My dad saw the tracks, but brushed it off as someone messing around. He turned on all the outdoor lights as a deterrent and went back to bed, leaving me alone in my room. I tried to settle back into the comfort of my movie, but unease lingered. Hours passed. My door clicked open. "Get out," I muttered, assuming it was my little brother. The door shut again and I turned back to my screen, but something gnawed at me. Moments later, a creak came from the floor behind me. "Get out!" I shouted, turning to see him, the man from outside. He stood in the doorway, waving at me again. My blood froze as he raised a finger to his lips, silently signaling me to stay quiet. Then he started toward me. Scrambled to get up, but he was faster. His gloved hand clamped over my mouth, pressing a damp, chemical-smelling towel to my face. I thrashed, trying to scream, to fight, but my body betrayed me. The world faded to black dot. When I came to, I was on the living room floor, surrounded by my parents and police. My head throbbed, my limbs felt heavy, but I was alive. My dad filled in the horrifying gaps. He'd heard the commotion from my room and burst in to find the man attacking me. My dad, towering and strong, managed to tackle him, but the man wriggled free and bolted out the front door before the police arrived. Later, they discovered how he'd gotten in. He'd forced open a downstairs window, crept through the house, and climbed the stairs to my room. To this day, the man remains unidentified. Every December, when the first snow falls, I think of his laughter, the way he waved at me, and the cold terror that came with that long, dark night. Out in the mountains, there's an unspoken rule during snowstorms. If someone needs shelter, you let them in. I never thought I'd be the one seeking refuge. But on a hunting trip that took a dangerous turn, I learned just how crucial and eerie that courtesy could be. It was supposed to be a relaxing long weekend of hunting. The morning started cold but sunny, the kind of crisp air that feels good in your lungs. As the day went on, the weather shifted. Dark clouds formed overhead, and before I knew it, I was caught in the middle of a fierce blizzard. After an unsuccessful day of tracking hares, I was too far from my cabin to make it back. Snow came down in heavy sheets, disorienting me as the daylight disappeared. Wandering blindly, I came across a small log cabin tucked within a circle of trees. The windows were dark, no sign of life, but I had no other choice. I knocked on the door, my fist hitting the rough wood. No answer. I was about to turn away when I heard footsteps inside. They were slow and deliberate, coming closer to the door. I waited for it to open, but it never did. Instead, a voice came from the other side, low, raspy, and calm. "Come in. Leave your boots by the door." The door creaked open just a crack, but no one stood to greet me. It felt odd, but the storm left me no options. I pushed the door open further and stepped inside. The cabin was dimly lit by 2 small candles on a wooden table. The flickering light barely illuminated the room, but it was enough to make out a worn-out couch and sparse furniture. On the far side of the room, I saw a silhouette. A man stood in the shadows, just out of the candlelight's reach. "Thanks for letting me stay," I said, trying to sound grateful. "It's brutal out there." He didn't respond, didn't move. Folks in the mountains can be strange, I reminded myself. If he wasn't up for conversation, I'd just get some rest and leave at first light. I dropped my bag on the floor and settled onto the couch. It was old and lumpy, but it would do. "Thanks again," I added, lying down. Still calm and nothing. I closed my eyes, trying to ignore the awkwardness, but something didn't sit right. I waited to hear his footsteps move away, maybe into another room. They didn't. I opened my eyes. The silhouette hadn't moved. He was still there, standing silently in the corner. My nerves started to prickle. "I'm just going to sleep now," I said, hoping for a response. There was none. I rolled over, turning my back to him. Sleep didn't come easy. I lay there, aware of the heavy silence. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me. I turned back. He was closer. Not much, but definitely closer. The faint candlelight just barely highlighted his forehead, revealing skin so pale it seemed almost translucent. My stomach sank. I sat up quickly, grabbed my belongings and muttered, "Thanks, but I think I'll keep moving." I didn't look at him again. I didn't want to. I hurried to the door, shoved my boots on outside and plunged back into the storm. The snow was relentless, but adrenaline pushed me forward. Not far down the hill, I saw another cabin. This one had lights glowing warmly from the windows. I practically ran to the door and knocked. An older man and his wife answered, their faces lined with concern. They ushered me in without hesitation, offering hot tea and a spot by the fire. I told them everything: the blizzard, the strange man in the dark cabin, his eerie stillness. The couple exchanged a look. The woman hesitated before speaking. "Are you sure it was that cabin?" she asked, describing the one I had just left. I nodded. "Yeah, that's the one." She paled, glancing at her husband. Then, in a hushed voice, she said, "That cabin's been vacant for 2 years. The owner, he was murdered there. They never caught who did it." The room felt colder, even with the fire blazing. I gripped the tea tightly, trying to make sense of it. But deep down, I already knew. Whoever, or whatever, let me in that night wasn't alive. In 2013 or 2014, my friend Carlos and I had a little side hustle. After big snowstorms, we'd grab our shovels and go door to door, offering to clear sidewalks and driveways for cash. Our small town was in the grip of a fierce blizzard one night, snow piling high, winds howling, and darkness setting in early. School was cancelled for the next day, so with nothing else to do, we decided to venture out. By 8 p.m., we were bundled up, trudging through the snow, knocking on doors. The first few houses weren't interested, and many people didn't even bother answering. But eventually, we got our first yes, a quick $15 each. Encouraged, we moved on, determined to make as much as we could. After another successful house, we hit a long, dry spell. Door after door, rejection after rejection. Then we arrived at a small corner house, which was promising. Corner houses usually paid more. Carlos rang the bell. The door cracked open just a sliver, but the person inside didn't show their face. Instead, a deep, nervous voice called out, "Who's there?" I gave my usual pitch. We'd shovel the property for $40. A pause followed before the voice replied, "Oh yes, $40 is fine." Something about his tone put me on edge, but I shrugged it off. The door shut without revealing the homeowner. I turned to Carlos and muttered, "That was weird." We got to work. I tackled the walkway and driveway while Carlos handled the sidewalk, but as I shoveled, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. When I glanced up at one of the windows, I saw a shadowy figure standing there. It was him, the homeowner, watching me. The room behind him was dark, so I couldn't make out his face, just his silhouette. Every time I looked up, he was still there, motionless. It gave me the creeps, but I tried to focus on finishing the job. Eventually, Carlos and I wrapped up. We headed back to the front door, ready to collect our payment, but before we reached the stoop, the door opened and the man's voice bellowed, "Go around back!" Carlos and I exchanged uneasy glances, but we obeyed, pushing through the snow to the backyard gate. The backyard was desolate, with a small awning providing some shelter from the falling snow. We stood by the back door, waiting. Minutes passed and no one came out. I knocked loudly, and after a moment I heard the man's voice again, but this time it came from an open window. "Come inside," he said. Against our better judgment, we stepped inside. The house was pitch black, the air heavy with an eerie silence. I called out, "Hello?" From another room, the man answered, "I'm counting your money at the table." The voice came from the kitchen, faintly illuminated by a streetlight outside. We walked toward the doorway leading to the kitchen. I stopped short and peeked through the crack of the door. My heart dropped. The man wasn't in the kitchen. He was standing right on the other side of the door, peering through the same crack at us. I turned quickly and whispered to Carlos, "We forgot something outside." Without waiting for a response, I bolted for the door. Carlos followed. We grabbed our shovels and ran as fast as we could through the deep snow, not stopping until we were back in my backyard. Shaken, we put the shovels away and went inside to warm up. But when Carlos went back out to grab his shovel to head home, he came back inside pale and panicked. "Come look at this," he said. In the snow, there was a fresh set of boot prints that hadn't been there before. They trailed from the gate to the back door, then to the shed in the corner of the yard. We rushed inside and told my mom. Living in a rough neighborhood, she didn't hesitate to call the police. Despite the terrible driving conditions, officers arrived quickly and went straight to investigate the shed. From the window, we watched as they pulled a man out. It was the homeowner. Even in the dim light, I recognized the shirt he'd been wearing earlier. The police later told us he admitted he had been planning to break into our house once we went to sleep. When they pressed him about why, he wouldn't answer. He was intoxicated, they said, but all I could think about was what might have happened if we hadn't left his house when we did. To this day, I can't forget the way he was standing behind that door watching us.